As you've seen in the last hour, free speech, especially conservative free speech, is under assault on multiple fronts. Here on the Ingram Angle, you can always count on us to expose and counter the true villains of free expression and free thought, no matter how powerful they may seem. That's it for us tonight. Please enjoy what's left of your Memorial Day holiday, but remember, please always fly your flag. Honor the memories of those who made the ultimate sacrifice. I'll be back here live, 10 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow. See you then.
We are live tonight, and we begin with a Fox News alert. There is renewed optimism a summit may happen as the U.S. team in North Korea is preparing to meet again with their counterparts. That is happening on the northern side of the DMZ. We've got a live report straight ahead. Plus, the Trump administration pushing back hard tonight on reports about unaccompanied immigrant children here illegally. We've got late-breaking details. And on this Memorial Day, an Army troop reunites 11 years after a tragedy. Together, they lead a small-town parade and give true meaning to honoring Memorial Day. You do not want to miss that story. Hello and welcome to Fox News at Night. I'm Shannon Bream in Washington. We begin tonight with North Korea, as it appears President Trump is back on track to meet dictator Kim Jong-un. New reports tonight. The U.S. has halted sanctions against the rogue regime as the two sides continue talking. Kristen Fisher is here with details. Good evening, Kristen.
Hey, Shannon. Well, there is mounting evidence that this on-again, off-again summit may end up happening after all. In addition to the U.S. team on the ground in North Korea, you also have the White House holding off on implementing new sanctions as these talks continue. That's according to the Wall Street Journal. And then there's a new statement tonight from the White House, which actually describes this summit as an expected meeting. President Trump spent part of his Memorial Day on the phone with Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. The White House says the two agreed to meet in person to continue close coordination in advance of the expected meeting between the United States and North Korea. Just 2 days after calling the summit off,
I've decided to terminate the planned summit in Singapore on June 12th.
On Saturday, President Trump did an about-face from the Oval Office.
It's moving along very nicely. So we're looking at June 12th in Singapore. That hasn't changed. And it's moving along pretty well. So we'll see what happens.
Some U.S. officials worry that with 2 weeks to go, there's not enough time to prepare for a meeting of this magnitude. But the president's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, argues this is all playing out perfectly.
He canceled it, and now we have Kim Jong-un back where he was before, talking about wanting to do it, meeting with the leader of South Korea. So I don't want to raise expectations, but I think the president's strategy has played out really brilliantly.
After that surprise meeting on Saturday, the president of South Korea said North Korean leader Kim Jong-un committed to complete denuclearization of the Korean peninsula, which is exactly what the White House wants. But many lawmakers on Capitol Hill, including some Republicans, remain deeply skeptical that the North Koreans will ever abandon their nuclear weapons.
So my suspicion remains that he is going to try to get as much sanctions relief as possible without having to give up his weapons. And I think it's going to be a lot of twists and turns along the way to try to get there, if it's even possible.
Another potential sticking point, the South Korean president said that Kim Jong-un still isn't sure that he can trust the U.S. He continues to be concerned by comments made by the vice president and the national security advisor John Bolton that perhaps the U.S. would follow the Libya model in North Korea. Shannon.
Did raise eyebrows on all sides of this conversation. Kristen, thank you very much. President Obama's Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, offering rare praise for President Trump's unusual diplomatic approach to his North Korean counterparts.
This is typical North Korean, one step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. That's what they always do. And in some ways, Kim Jong-un may have met his match here with our very unconventional president.
All right, let's bring in Cliff May for analysis, president of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Cliff, welcome. Great to have you with us tonight.
Thanks. Great to be here.
What do you make of former DNI Clapper's assessment that maybe Kim Jong-un has, quote, met his match in this president?
Well, coming especially from James Clapper, that's quite a compliment for President Trump. President Trump obviously does diplomacy unconventionally. And I think what Clapper is saying is maybe this is going to have an impact that we haven't had in the previous administration or the administration before that or the administration before that, because we've been going back and forth, not succeeding with North Korea for about a quarter of a century.
Okay, so there are a number of countries that are critical to us getting this done. We saw there the president talking with Prime Minister Abe, but when it comes to China, when it comes to Russia, and many other countries that are not essentially enforcing the sanctions in full, what partners do we need to get on board in order to actually make something happen?
The hardest partner and the most consequential is, of course, China. And China has seen North Korea as an asset. It's pit bull, it barks a lot, it bites at America's legs, it keeps America distracted, and it represents a threat to America, and China has seen that as a good thing. What has to change? China has to see North Korea not as an asset, but rather as a liability. That's not easy, but it's not impossible. That's going to probably require President Trump putting a lot of economic pressure, not just on North Korea, much more than he has already, but also on China. That will hurt China. It may hurt the U.S. as well, but unless he shows that he's willing to do that, and a couple other things we can talk about, China is not going to see this as its problem to solve.
Well, and I know that North Korea's economy, among other things, is very opaque. It's tough for us to get a real look at what's happening there. And there are some accounts that I read today that said financially they're not doing as bad as people would think maybe that they are. There's still currency flowing, that they've got weapons that are trading throughout the Middle East, that the unrest there actually benefits them in many ways.
The strategy that the president has talked about with North Korea, and by the way with Iran as well, is one of maximum pressure. Maximum pressure means that the U.S. economy is so strong, we can put such pressure on, sanctions not as bee bites, sanctions as sledgehammers up the side of the head, that we can crush a foreign economy like North Korea, so we can make it crumble. So there are two questions. Can we actually do that? And will we actually do that? Because we haven't before. If you want to look at an analogy, we had very tough sanctions on Iran before they came to the negotiating table. We lifted them. President Obama lifted them. The economy of Iran went from substantial recession into recovery, and we never got another concession after that. Now, already, North Korea has had about a 2-month respite from serious sanctions, and is probably going to get, as I understand it, another respite between now and June 12th. I think that the president has to put very tough sanctions on so that Kim Jong-un looks around and says, my economy could actually implode. That would be dangerous. Plus, this guy Trump is so crazy, he might even use military means. I don't want a missile on my breakfast table one morning.
That is very motivating for folks if they think it's a real possibility. All right, Cliff May, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us tonight. Great to have you. All right, despite the Memorial Day holiday, judging by the tweets and interviews this weekend, the Russia probe is clearly front and center for the president and his legal team. White House correspondent Kevin Corke is tracking the developments for us.
Shannon, Mayor Giuliani acknowledges that the administration is effectively trying to muddy the waters when it comes to the Russia probe. Basically, what they're saying is this is an unfair probe from the very outset, and they want it to stop as soon as possible. This, by the way, as the president took to Twitter to once again criticize the previous administration's handling of the ongoing Russia probe. Let me take you there to tell you what President Trump had to say. He said, listen, why didn't President Obama do something about the so-called Russian meddling when he was told about it by the FBI before the election? He adds this: because he thought crooked Hillary was going to win, and he didn't want to upset the apple cart. He was in charge, not me, and did nothing. Now, that tweet and Mayor Giuliani's pushback of the special counsel on television are clearly part of an aggressive posture, pitting the White House against a probe they think is not only unfair, Shannon, they think it's unsafe for the president to even be interviewed for.
The reality is we're not going to sit him down if this is a trap for perjury. And until we're convinced of that. And if they don't show us these documents, well, we just going to have to say no. Let me emphasize, he wants to explain that he did nothing wrong. It's us, the lawyers, who have to convince him that this is a trap.
Clearly, Mayor Giuliani's strategy has drawn the ire of some Democrats, but also from some former Obama administration officials. Let me tell you what happened on this CNN panel. You may have missed this. A woman by the name of Samantha Vinogard, who was a national security analyst for CNN and again worked for the Obama administration previously, said that she's, quote, a little disturbed when Rudy Giuliani and Vladimir Putin seem to have the same mission here. She added Giuliani was making the exact points that Vladimir Putin wants him to, and that's really hurting us protect our country. Meanwhile, in a conversation with our colleague Bill Hemmer over the weekend, the mayor stood by his assertion that the DOJ and the FBI need to explain the Obama administration's apparent use of an informant inside the Trump campaign, both during and after the 2016 election.
Everything wrong with the government spying on a candidate of the opposition party. That's a Watergate, a Spygate. I mean, and without any warning to him. And now, to compound that, to make it into a criminal investigation, Bill, that's why this is a rigged investigation.
Which ultimately could lead to an investigation of the investigation, if you will. Just the latest twist in the tale of the election, Shannon, that for some reason just won't go away. Happy Memorial Day weekend to you. Back to you.
And you as well, Kevin. Thank you very much. Well, Giuliani also says the president's legal team would refuse a possible interview with special counsel Robert Mueller unless it can review classified information on the origins of the Russia probe, including but not limited to details about that possible government informant, the one the president says has been spying on his campaign. Well, let's bring in two of our favorite legal eagles, constitutional attorney Robert Barnes and former Deputy Assistant Attorney General and former U.S. Attorney Harry Litman. Great to have both of you with us tonight, gentlemen.
Thank you, Shannon.
Good to be here.
Okay, so let's start here. We want to play a little bit more about what Rudy Giuliani had to say yesterday about possibly sitting down and what he expects first.
And if they don't show us these documents, well, we just going to have to say no. Let me emphasize, he wants to explain that he did nothing wrong. It's us, the lawyers, who have to convince him that this is a trap.
Robert, fair to say it's a trap?
Absolutely, it's a trap. The entire investigation has been not about exposing any Russia collusion, but about covering up the illegal spying and lying the Obama administration engaged in against an opposition political party and President Trump. So Rudy's basically, his core convictions are precisely correct. It would be a major mistake to sit down and engage in an interview with someone who is not in good faith producing information that's relevant to the investigation and relevant to the defense.
All right, Harry, how does this work when you are potentially a person of interest? We have to be careful with the language we use here. A subject, somebody who's involved, who may get involved, to ask the potential prosecutor to see the information that they build their case on.
Is that for me, Shannon?
That's for you, Harry.
There is not a defendant in the United States, including the President of the United States, who has ever been entitled to see this information. He can see it in court if there are charges. It's a completely unprecedented request. As to Robert's general point about Spygate, or echoing Rudy here, you know, there are two problems with this Spygate claim. One is the spy, the other's the gate. Dr. Helper is by no means a spy. The notion is to try to have overtones of Watergate or J. Edgar Hoover. There is no embedding of an FBI employee in the campaign. Rather, there's the use of a confidential informant, completely routine from bank robbery to any crime, when, I remind you, the FBI had received information, credible information, that Russia was planning to do a campaign to try to influence
Harry,
our election.
Are we talking about semantics here? Because people want to quibble over, you know, whether it's somebody that you don't know is contacting people, getting information from them and feeding it back to a federal agency. Robert, some people call that spying.
Well, that's exactly what it was.
But semantics really, no. Robert, semantics really matter here. What spying implies, as in Watergate, and this is why they're using it, is the notion of one party actually putting an agent in the ranks of another.
Let me ask you that, Robert, does it matter if that person's embedded or if they are on the fringes of the campaign and have contacts and feed that information back?
I've done a lot of cases involving government misconduct, and every single time they hid behind confidential informant. My guess when it comes out, Stephen Halper will have never been identified as a confidential informant. His main partner in his company in the UK is the longtime head of the MI6, which was the spy agency that formed the first dodgy dossier about getting the UK into the Iraqi war. So clearly what Halper did here was infiltrate the campaign for the purposes of both spreading disinformation and for gathering information. And by anybody's definition, that's called a spying. And because they were doing it in such a way and have tried to cover it up after that, that's the gate. So that's why it's Spygate.
Okay, all right. With that explanation, Harry, listen, you say that this is so unusual that no defendant would have this potential access to information. But this is so different. This is a sitting president of the United States. His legal team says that if he's subpoenaed, they'll fight it all the way to the Supreme Court, and you know they would. But this is a kind of a negotiation here. His legal team keeps publicly saying, we don't want to do it. He definitely wants to do it. He tells the cameras, and every time we ask him, he wants to do it because he believes he's innocent. It may sound unusual, but this is a very unusual case. Is it just part of the negotiation?
So I agree with that. First of all, he has been saying for months, I want to do it. At this point, we think maybe he doth protest too much and that, in fact, he's trying to avoid it. But I agree that this sort of ploy, asking for something no one should get because he's the president, is really a maneuver to try to improve, sweeten the deal for when he does interview. If he goes to court, I'm rare among this on the left, by the way. I don't think it's cut and dried. I think Mueller will win, but I don't think Trump. I think Trump wants to avoid going to court, and this is part of the negotiation. I basically agree with you.
Robert, just very quickly, we're out of time, but what do you think happens if they take the subpoena fight to the Supreme Court?
I think, as Justice Story said a long time ago, that the president cannot be subject to criminal grand jury process. And I think what this request reveals is that it isn't President Trump who has something to hide. It's Bob Mueller and the Obama administration that has something to hide.
We shall see, gentlemen. Robert and Harry, always great to have a great debate with you guys.
Thanks
for
very
joining
much.
us.
Thanks, Robert. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
And by the way, we have not confirmed any of the names that either of them would have referenced there. We have not done that yet, so we'll continue working on that. By the way, new tonight, Virginia Republican Thomas Garrett says he's not going to seek re-election to the House because he's struggling with alcoholism. In a video statement first reported by the Washington Post, you can see him holding back tears as he says he's a good man, but he's also an alcoholic. The news comes days after unnamed staffers told Politico the congressman mistreated them by ordering them to do personal tasks like walking his dog. Former President George H.W. Bush expressing regret tonight via Twitter about missing today's Memorial Day festivities as he remains hospitalized in Maine. Over the weekend, the former president visited veterans for a pancake breakfast. That was before spokesman Jim McGrath tweeted that he's going to be hospitalized for a few days, citing low blood pressure and fatigue. He says Mr. Bush is not in any discomfort. Well, President Trump visits Arlington Cemetery and honors veterans, both living and those buried at the iconic Veterans Cemetery. Jennifer Griffin has that story. And one of President Obama's former top advisors tweets out a photo showing the sad plight of children taken from their parents as a slap at the Trump administration's immigration policy. But those images, they come from a year his boss was still in the White House. We will separate fact from fiction. Plus, no relief in sight for the Aloha State, the Kilauea volcano in Hawaii spewing deadly gas. And a missing veteran he's missing because he was trying to help folks in a massive flood in Maryland. It's been wreaking havoc there. On top of that, we've got a tropical storm rolling into the Florida Panhandle. We've got updates on all these stories right after the break. This is a Fox News alert. The Trump administration is pushing back hard late tonight on a report that thousands of illegal immigrant children were lost after crossing the border and going through government processing. The Department of Health and Human Services says it no longer has custody of the children once they're released to sponsors. Quote, these children are not lost. Their sponsors simply did not respond or could not be reached. In many cases, sponsors cannot be reached because they themselves are illegal aliens. Well, outraged progressives shared an image of caged children over the weekend, blasting the administration's policies toward young immigrants. But it turns out that picture was taken in 2014 during the Obama administration. Well, let's bring in former Ohio State Senate Democratic Minority Leader Capri Cafaro and Beverly Hallberg, president of the District Media Group. Welcome to you both, ladies. Good to have you with us tonight.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's talk about what's going on here. I mean, this tweet, a number of left-leaning people put the tweet out over the weekend. Some of them retracted it. Some of them still have it up. Some of them actually corrected it and admitted the year was wrong on it. Capri, I mean, it's a very heated conversation and debate, but social media is a dangerous thing. We've all learned the lesson the hard way.
That's right. That's right. I mean, I think this is a really good lesson in the fact that we need to be very careful about what we tweet and retweet. And, you know, we talk about clickbait, you know, things that draw you in and you're not necessarily vetting them. You're just, you know, emotionally reacting and putting it out there. We all have a responsibility, particularly those in the public sphere, to, you know, be discerning about what we put out there in the social media and in the internet space, because 1 second, you know, you put it out there and it becomes fact. And with this particular issue, and hopefully we will get into this, there are so many nuances about who's right and who's wrong about the quote unquote lost kids. You know, Democrats and Republicans, I think, neither of them are getting this argument right.
Yeah, and both of them have said there have been leaders on both sides of the aisle to come out and say, listen, we got to figure this out. This has got to be resolved. This is not something that any party, it's nonpartisan. I mean, people should want to make sure that kids are safe and sound. Now, I want to talk about the president. He had a lot of tweets this weekend. This is one of them. He said, put pressure on the Democrats to end the horrible law that separates children from their parents once they cross the border into the U.S. Catch and release, lottery, and chain must also go with it, and we must continue building the wall. All caps, Democrats are protecting MS-13 thugs. Now, Beverly, I mean, they tried to get a number of things passed on the Hill. They couldn't. And of course, we always have to note in the Senate, you need Democrats' help because you don't have 60 Republicans over there. But none of them could seem to get it together. You know, Democrats are saying there's no law that forces these kids to be separated. But if their parents are jailed, they can't be jailed. It's a mess. And nobody seems to be solving it.
Yeah, this is a tough issue. I'm not sure. I'm not sure where Republicans and Democrats are going to come down on this issue. This is a tough issue, but I'm glad that minors are in the focus. And the reason is even when you look at unaccompanied minors where they came here underneath the Obama administration, even under the Trump administration, we even had some of our elected officials, Mark Meadows and even Marco Rubio, came out and said, sadly, many of these young minors are being human trafficked. They are victims of that. So I think we need to look at this very carefully because not all adults who are bringing them over here are actually members of their family. So I'm glad that the president is putting this in focus.
Yeah, and we have something I want to play from the Attorney General. He said earlier in May, he was talking about this issue of people bringing children here. Sometimes they're parents, sometimes they're not. Here's what he said, and I'll get your reaction after this.
If you don't want your child to be separated, then don't bring them across the border illegally. It's not our fault that somebody does that.
Quick response from you both. We'll start with you, Capri.
Sure. Sure. I mean, look, ultimately, you know, I hear what he's saying, but a child is a child. They're obviously leaving a situation that is dire, which is why they're taking all of these risks. I think that we have to remember, again, facts do matter. And there's a lot of things that have been brought up. Catch and release, for example. Catch and release is actually a result of a June 2001 Supreme Court case under George W. Bush. In 2005, then Homeland Security Secretary Michael Chertoff said he was going to end it. It never necessarily happened that way. Then there was a directive by President Obama in 2014. We need to stop pointing figures. It's the kids that matter.
Yeah. Quickly, Beverly, final word to you.
And what our lawmakers need to decide is if you're not going to enforce the law, you need to change the law. The reason why we do have people coming over into the border is because they have the incentive to do so because we haven't followed the laws on the books. I hope that we can come to an agreement because that's the important thing is to do something legislatively.
Yeah, everybody agrees that watching out for these kids. And listen, HHS is saying we can do more if you want us to. We're not equipped financially or the resource to do it, but if you want us to, we're going to need more money. Again, that requires Congress. So we'll watch and wait. Exactly. Capri and Beverly, thank you both.
Thank you.
All right, the president paying tribute at Arlington National Cemetery to the nation's fallen heroes. But as Jennifer Griffin reports this Memorial Day, Arlington is facing a growing dilemma.
They were generals and privates, captains and corporals of every race, color, and of every creed.
The president was joined by his cabinet secretaries and families of the fallen at Arlington National Cemetery to mark Memorial Day by laying a wreath at the Tomb of the Unknowns. He welcomed the oldest living survivor of Pearl Harbor, 106-year-old Navy veteran Ray Chavez, and Senator and World War II veteran Bob Dole.
Bob, thank you for honoring us with your presence.
And recalled meeting 7-year-old Christian Jacobs, wearing a full Marine uniform, saluting his father's grave. Sergeant Christopher Jacobs served in Iraq and Afghanistan and was killed in a training accident 6 months after his son was born. Under new regulations being considered by the Army, Sergeant Jacobs would not be eligible to be buried at Arlington. America's iconic Veterans Cemetery is running out of space. The final resting place for 420,000 veterans, adding 7,000 more each year. The Army must weigh whether to change the burial criteria, limiting it to those killed in combat or awarded the military's highest medals for heroism.
Without any type of change in eligibility and expansion, by 2041, we're going to be out of room.
Arlington National Cemetery was initially established during the Civil War when a Union general began burying the war dead on what was General Robert E. Lee's family plantation overlooking Washington, D.C.
A country worth fighting for indeed.
Defense Secretary James Mattis gave a sense of what it means to be buried at Arlington today with a quote from Robert Louis Stevenson.
Under the wide and starry sky, dig the grave and let me lie. Glad did I live and gladly die, and I laid me down with a will.
But with Arlington National Cemetery running out of room, the nation must now decide whether to break its promise to past veterans who expected to have this be their final resting place, or to limit the criteria in the future. Shannon?
Jennifer Griffin at the Pentagon, thank you. President Trump rolls back another Obama-era edict. This time its goal is to revitalize mining towns. Will it work? Mike Emanuel has our story. And the Trump administration unveils its plan to lower drug prices. We've got details when we return. A Utah man and his wife released from captivity in Venezuela, returning home to Salt Lake City tonight. The Holts arriving from Washington, where they stopped here to meet President Trump on Sunday after being released from a Venezuelan prison where they'd spent nearly 2 years. The Mormon missionaries were accused of spying and stockpiling weapons, charges they have always denied. Well, tonight another Obama-era decision has been reversed. Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel has more from Capitol Hill about new action aimed at bringing mining towns back to life in America's heartland. Mike?
Shannon, good evening. As you will recall, President Obama was famous for saying he was going to use his pen and his phone to get things done, things that he could not get done through Congress. Well, tonight there is some news as it relates to mining, and joining me from the great state of Minnesota, Republican Congressman Tom Emmer. Congressman Emmer, tell me about the news as it relates to mining communities like you have in northern Minnesota.
Well, first off, I got to tell you, northern Minnesota is Trump country. President Trump is the first Republican candidate for president to win northern Minnesota since before the Great Depression. What happened under the Obama administration, last day that the President Obama was leaving, literally the last day, they tried to kill 2 potential leases for mining opportunities in northern Minnesota. And they started a study to withdraw some 234,000 acres from any future exploration or potential development, which this would be huge in Minnesota because you're talking 5,000 potential mining jobs, not to mention the 12,000 construction jobs that you would have if someone actually proposed a mine on one of these 2 leases. Now, thanks to President Trump and his administration, the Department of the Interior has announced they are renewing the 2 leases that President Obama tried to kill. But we still have the study that's ongoing with the Forest Service that the president needs to end. That study's been going on for 17 months. It needs to be done so that they can get to the business of exploring whether or not the great people of Minnesota can mine the largest copper nickel deposit in the world. So what the president has done with his administration, one, is revitalize the opportunity for mining in northern Minnesota. Now we've got to follow through. They got to end the study, get the leases finalized, and grow not only wealth, but protect our precious minerals that, look, if we have to go get them somewhere else, this is a national security threat. So the president has done amazing things so far. They just got to close the loop on this and make sure that not only are the leases renewed, but the study is ended so we can get on with the business of exploration and hopefully someday development.
Congressman Tom Emmer, thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mike.
Pleasure, sir. Yep. So, Shannon, this evening there's some good news for mining communities in northern Minnesota and elsewhere across the country. Back to you, Shannon.
All right.
Old things. He's not afraid of special interests. He's very supportive of what we want to do to help improve the American healthcare delivery system.
Last week, Medicare and Medicaid czar Seema Verma announced the first important step to put teeth to the president's bold promise to prove the president right and Nancy Pelosi wrong. She unveiled the new drug dashboard, where a senior finally gets to see the price increases for every drug he or she is taking. Basic allergy drugs like Zyrtec, diabetes and cholesterol drugs, and an important arthritis drug, Enbrel, were up almost 20% last year, with Enbrel costing a whopping $2,700 per patient. I spoke with Administrator Verma in her very first on-camera exclusive about this exciting price transparency tool and how it works.
The drug dashboard is a transparency tool. It's an opportunity for patients and the public to see what's going on with drug prices. You know, we've gone from just having 70 drugs on that dashboard to now we have 3,000 drugs. You can see the price increases year over year from 2012 to 2016. And you can see which manufacturers.
Knowing the outrageous cost of your drugs is only step one. Step two is bringing those costs down.
We've hired essentially negotiators on our behalf. And what we want to do is strengthen their negotiating power. So that's why I want to, increase competition and make sure that they can do the types of things that are already going on in the commercial market, and giving them the ability to do that in the Medicare program to lower prices for seniors.
Verma reports that this year alone, drug discount negotiations with hospitals are saving seniors $320 million. Now, while Verma praises drug companies for innovations that have saved lives and brought us all healthier lives, she also points out that if folks can't afford their medications, these innovations are meaningless. Shannon?
Dr. Siegel, thank you very much for digging into that. Well, massive floods in Maryland. A veteran pitching in to give a helping hand is swept away. We'll have the latest. And the Kilauea eruption forces more evacuations as volcanic smog becomes the latest hazard. We'll have a report from Hawaii. More rain is on the way for the Florida Panhandle, Alabama, and parts of Georgia, between 4 to 8 inches. Now downgraded to a subtropical depression, Alberto is headed inland after Memorial Day strike on the Gulf Coast. Forecasters are warning of heavy downpours and the possibility of flooding. Earlier today, a South Carolina news anchor and photojournalist were killed while covering the storm when a tree fell on their SUV. Tonight, rescuers in Ellicott City, Maryland are still searching for a National Guard member who was reported missing after trying to assist people caught in rushing floodwaters there. Sudden and violent floodwaters destroyed homes, businesses, and submerged vehicles. Maryland's governor declared a state of emergency this morning. Officials and witnesses say 39-year-old Edison Herman was last seen trying to help a woman whose cat was missing in that raging flood. Well, there is a little bit of good news out of Hawaii tonight. The Kilauea lava flow threatening a geothermal power plant on Hawaii's Big Island has stopped for now, and there's been no release of dangerous hydrogen sulfide gas as originally feared. But the threat is far from over. Jeff Paul joins us with more on the volcano tonight.
Well, VOG, or volcano smog, is a big concern today, and as you take a look off to the side of us, you can see some of those plumes rising from one of the active fissures in the area. We're also learning about a new eruption at one of the craters near the Kilauea volcano, which sent an ash cloud 13,000 feet into the air. Now, within those plumes, authorities warn of not only ash, but sulfur dioxide. They say this volcano is showing no signs of stopping, and we got a chance to see the newest fissure developing up close. Well, as we were pulling up to this road, we saw a lot of residents out sort of taking in the scene, but the Hawaii National Guard feels this is a particular location that could give someone the false sense of security. So take a look at here. This is how it starts. Cracks in the road, and then there is steam. And after that, that's when lava can start flowing. And geologists say that makes this very dangerous, because no one knows if or when it will happen. And once that lava starts pumping, there's really no way of telling where it will go or when it will stop. Late last night, there was a warning put out by the county urging folks in the subdivision Leilani Estates to evacuate. This is some new video of that area. Lava flow started moving much faster than anticipated, and authorities were worried folks might become trapped. We spoke with one woman who had recently helped her parents get out of their house that's now destroyed and covered in lava.
I hope I don't ever see this in my lifetime again. Once is enough.
Once is good enough. But yeah, it's tragic, but it's awe-inspiring. It's like unbelievable what nature and what Pele. I mean, this is her land, and she's showing proof of what she can do, and it's incredible.
Well, as you heard her reference, Pele, that's the Hawaiian goddess of fire. Her name is often tossed around by locals who've lived here for quite some time. Most of the people in this area and those who've been affected by this volcano are at peace with what's happening, saying that it's out of their hands. Shannon?
All right. Thank you very much for the update from Hawaii. We'll keep on that story. Well, an emotional Memorial Day reunion for the surviving members of an Army troop 11 years after a deadly emergency rescue mission. It's a story you don't want to miss. Plus, a teacher shot 3 times, then tackled the school shooter. In his words, he explains what happened and how the community is now reaching out to help.
I want to make it clear that my actions on that day, in my mind, were the only acceptable actions I could have done given the circumstances.
On Memorial Day 2007, an Army troop deployed in Iraq went on an emergency rescue mission when they were suddenly ambushed. 6 soldiers died in the attack. Tim Hallring lived through the mission, and on this Memorial Day, his hometown, he was asked to be a grand marshal there in the small town of Highlands, New Jersey. Tim agreed, but under the condition that the rest of his brothers would be there too. So with the help of GoFundMe, the town of Highlands got the troop back together for the parade. And only we were there to capture their reunion 11 years later.
It's indescribable, losing friends right in front of you and not being able to do anything about it. We lost 6 that day.
It was a DART mission, a down aircraft recovery mission, and they gave us the location to go, and we went, and we got ambushed on the way there and lost a few guys, and I didn't even know it was Memorial Day until we got back.
Memorial Day was a tough day for all of us. It's one of those things that just kind of punches you in the stomach and takes your breath away. But luckily, I got some good troopers over there that help us all through it. Timmy standing by us, getting us all together, and it just makes it a little bit easier.
The commander of the American Legion called me up one day and asked me if I wanted to do it, and I wasn't sure if I did. I don't ever want to do stuff on that day. It's very personal. And when he said Grand Marshal, I said, let me get back to you. And I called up some of the guys that I was with on that Memorial Day. I wanted to make sure that they knew that it was going to be a bigger parade than anything that they've seen.
We're brothers. That's all it is. Combat vets, we always stick together. We always have each other's back. So it was an honor.
Memorial Day, it's a tough day. A lot of people like to go out there and enjoy themselves and barbecue it up, and maybe have a few, and it's fine, but I like to remember, not just for the people that we lost, but people before us. We're pretty fortunate to be in a place that we're at, and it was because of them that we're able to do a lot of the stuff that we're able to do today.
It's not Veterans Day. It's a day where we remember those who died in the service of our country.
I haven't looked forward to a Memorial Day in 11 years because there's billboards, there's radio commercials, Memorial Day sale, Memorial Day giveaway, and it's just a lot more somber for me. It's a day of honor. It's not a day of summer. I feel like people forget that.
This one's different because I got my brothers here. I haven't seen some of these guys in about 10 and some people in 12 years. And so being able to see them, it really, really makes me happy. It makes me feel like me again.
My friend Jonathan Markham, his wife and his son are coming, and he never got to know his son. He was too young when he deployed. This is a chance for us to let his son know who he was. and he's going to lead the parade. It couldn't be a better tribute. That day's different for us. It's very personal for us, and that's why we want this parade to be personal. And we want to remind the American people of what Memorial Day is supposed to be.
And that is exactly what it's all about. Well, the Indiana teacher who tackled an armed student during Friday's shooting at a suburban Indianapolis middle school says he wants the focus to be on a 13-year-old girl who was seriously injured. Jason Seaman says Ella Whistler's courage is nothing short of remarkable. Seaman was also shot but not badly injured. He is out of the hospital.
As a person who isn't looking for attention, nor entirely comfortable with the situation I'm currently in, I want to make it clear that my actions on that day, in my mind, were the only acceptable actions I could have done given the circumstances. I deeply care for my students and their well-being, so that is why I did what I did that day.
The shooting suspect, believed to be a 7th grader, is in custody. Meanwhile, a local high school student set up a GoFundMe page for Seaman's family to pay hospital bills and other expenses. The goal was $80,000, and donations have surpassed that. Finally, this weekend, it's a big weekend if you're a racing fan. The Indy 500 at the Brickyard in Indianapolis, and NASCAR's longest race in Charlotte, where we saw something very special. Jeffrey Earnhardt, grandson of the legendary racer Dale Earnhardt, had the names of 617 fallen service members listed on the hood of his car. Well, one family was surprised. Stephanie Manis saw her husband George's name on the door of the car, and she was overcome with emotion. Earnhardt called the experience touching and said he himself also had trouble holding back tears. It's all about honoring the fallen. This weekend and today, let us never forget them and those that they have left behind as well. Most watched, most trusted, and most grateful you spent your evening with us. Good night from Washington. I'm Shannon Bream.